Hi, guys, and welcome to the podcast to Never Stop Reading the series. My name is Cheney, but feel free to refer to me as Chang Gang, everyone does. In this series, I will introduce many different works of art. Mostly, I'll be talking about books. If you're a bookworm and love to read, then you've come to the right place. You may even discover new books you've never read or even heard of before. In Season 1, we will be discussing the After series and the books talked about and read by the main character. I will start out by reading Pride and Prejudice, written and published January 17, 1813 by Jane Austen. Austen wrote about the turbulent relationship between Elizabeth Bennet, the daughter of a country gentleman, and Fitzwilliam Darcy, a rich aristocratic landowner. They must overcome the titular sins of Pride and Prejudice in order to fall in love and marry. This story was also made into a movie produced in 2005, but we will be focusing on the book. This book was talked about in the After series. It is one of the reasons Teresa Young, also known as Tessa, and Hardin Scott fell in love. They talked about this book in their college English class and wrote a report. Hardin wrote at the end of the first book in his report a letter to Tessa that read, "I've read hundreds of novels in my life, most of them claiming that love was the center of the universe, that it could heal any damage inside of us, that it was what they needed to survive. From Darcy to Heathcliff, they were fools. That love was something fictional, only found in worn pages of a book. It was just made up to keep humans full of hope, that it was a lie. But that all changed since I met my Elizabeth Bennet. I never thought I would find myself completely and utterly consumed by another until her. She took my hand and led me out of the darkness and showed me that, whatever our souls are made of, hers and mine are the same. I'm sorry, please forgive me. You once asked who I love most in the world? It's you." Hardin's letter to Tessa. To know the story of why and how Tessa and Hardin fell in love, we have to know the story of Pride and Prejudice. This is why I will read the story first, before reading the after novel. Here are the novels I will read in Season 1 in no particular order. After We Collided, After We Fell, After Ever Happy, After Everything, Before, Nothing More, and Nothing Less, by Anna Todd and Imaginator 1D on Wattpad. Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre by the Bronte sisters, Emily and Charlotte. Northanger Abbey, Emma, Sense and Sensibility, and Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Sun Also Rises, and A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. Let's get into the note of Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen, born 1775, died 1817, was the seventh child of a country rector, born in Steventon, Hampshire, England. Though her family was not wealthy, Austen enjoyed a genteel education and early on displayed the wit and intelligence evident in her works. Austen's first novel, Lady Susan, published posthumously in 1871, was written about 1793 to 1794 and is predated by a substantial body of juvenilia, plays, verses, novellas, and prose. Written between the year 1787 and 1795, the 6 major novels were published between 1811 and 1817. Sense and Sensibility in 1811, Pride and Prejudice in 1813, Mansfield Park in 1814, Emma in 1815 to 1816, Northanger Abbey in 1817, and Persuasion in 1817. Pride and Prejudice is perhaps the most popular of Austen's novels. It was well received immediately upon publication, and today it remains a classic of English literature. Like Austen's other novels, its primary subject is marriage. Some critics point to this theme as evidence of Austen's conservatism, claiming that the comic resolution of the novel affirms conventional 19th century values. Other criticism suggests that Austen's novels implicate a society that restricted women's options to either marriage or a dismal spinsterhood. According to these readings, the comic ending is ironic and often anticlimactic, brought about despite negligent or absent parent figures and despite a limited pool of capable marriage partners. As James Thompson notes, Austen sends her heroines out to do business in a bad market, only to have them overcome all obstacles and marry well. Pride and Prejudice certainly fits this pattern. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, though comic figures, are seriously ineffectual parents, directly responsible for the disastrous elopement of their daughter Lydia with the scoundrel Wickham. The seriousness of this event, the greatest dramatic conflict in the novel, cannot be overemphasized. If Wickham had refused to marry Lydia, the marriage prospects of her four sisters would have been ruined. On Mr. Bennet's death, at which time the family estate would revert to Mr. Collins, the nearest male relative, Mrs. Bennet and her daughters would have been left destitute, ostracized by polite society, and entirely dependent on Mr. Collins' unlikely charity. A potential disaster is averted by Fitzwilliam Darcy, whose stormy courtship of Elizabeth Bennet is one of the most famous in literature. Darcy is not Elizabeth's only suitor. Mr. Collins, too, harbors an attraction for his fair cousin until she rejects his proposal of marriage. He promptly turns his attention to her friend Charlotte Lucas, who hears his proposal more favorably. Mr. Collins, to be sure, was neither sensible nor agreeable. His society was irksome, and his attachment to her must be imaginary. But still, he would be her husband without thinking highly either of men or of matrimony. Marriage had always been her object. It was the only honorable provision for well-educated young women of small fortune, and however uncertain of giving happiness, must be their pleasant preservation from want. Charlotte's future prospects, of course, bear no resemblance to Elizabeth's. Despite Darcy's concerns about the Bennet's poverty and Elizabeth's prejudices against his arrogance, the two are happily married at Buck's End. Whether this resolution constitutes romance or social criticism, the genius of Pride and Prejudice cannot be underestimated, even by the author. Of her novel, Austen wrote, "The work is rather too light and bright and sparkling. It wants to be stretched out here and there with a long chapter of sense. If it could be had, if not, a solemn species, nonsense, about something unconnected with the story, an essay on writing, a critique on Walter Scott, or a history on Bonaparte, the novel is bright and sparkling, notwithstanding Austen's humorous assessment. It is also full of sharp and incisive satire, and it justifiably ranks as one of the greatest novels in Western history. Tell me every terrible thing you ever did, and let me love you anyways." Edgar Allan Poe.